How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to D'Angelo's Woodcraft. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different as I'm going through some significant life changes and felt like sharing a bit more about that on the channel. So while I am going to give you some insight into how I made these red cedar adirondack side tables, I'll be focused a bit more about myself leading up to the start of this channel and then discuss the aforementioned life changes and how that's going to look for my woodworking journey going forward. Without further ado, let's get into it. I first want to give you a little background about myself, as I really haven't done that in a video yet. I grew up in the Detroit metropolitan area where I lived until I turned 18 and went off to college at Butler University in Indianapolis. I started in a mechanical engineering program but wound up changing majors to Management Information Systems, MIS for short, by the beginning of my junior year. Part of the reason for that being that I was really struggling with physics. I've always been pretty good at math. Calc 2 wasn't all that bad for me, humble brag, but for some reason I always struggled a bit with applied physics. But the other reason being that the engineering program was 5 years, where the 5th year would take place at another university nearby that was significantly cheaper than Butler. I felt like this was a bit of a scam, going to a different college but still paying for the more expensive school. Anyways, I graduated in May of 2020 amidst the COVID pandemic and had to move back in with my parents for the summer. During this period, I was searching for jobs, but also pursuing what was a major passion of mine at the time, making music. Even though I had just received my Bachelor's of Science, the degree didn't feel all that rewarding. Coupled with constant job application rejections and being stuck in my parents' basement, I felt the need to create something that success was entirely dictated by my own hands, and not those of a third party or corporation. Just a quick note on the video here, you might notice that this octagonal glue up is much smaller all of a sudden. I realized I made these way too big for a side table, so the big octagon was set to the side and I made the next ones a lot smaller. That big one was for a 24-inch tabletop, and it's still just sitting in the shop, so if you like this design, feel free to reach out to me in the comments or on my Etsy page, and I could finish this and sell it to you. Getting back to what I was just discussing, my family has a cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, so after sorting out a time, I headed up there for a week with all my music equipment to write and record a few songs for a more professionally produced EP that I could put up on all the major streaming platforms. If you're interested, I still have my music up everywhere under the name Chris D'Angelis. It's heavily inspired by some of my favorite artists like Tame Impala, Daft Punk, Phoenix, and Gorillaz. I've only got 6 songs up, with You've Come a Long Ways being one of my favorites, but if you like music that's vibey and alternative, you should check it out. Anyways, that project was really rewarding for me as a creative outlet and an opportunity to prove I could accomplish my own goals. And although I haven't made music in some time, the skills and software I learned from music production are actually being utilized to make and process the voiceover and audio you're hearing now. I find that pretty cool to see past skills, which I thought I might never use again, resurface in my current passions. But one of the things that's difficult about passions is that they can change over time, especially once a passion starts turning more into work than just a fun outlet. I think that's something I've actually really struggled with in the past. As I've moved through life, I've come to realize that no matter what you do, whether it be for fun or for a living, once something becomes work, it's inevitable that it's going to be boring sometimes. Part of the reason I fell off with music is for this exact reason, and it's something I found myself worried about with D'Angelo's Woodcraft as well. There have definitely been times I've struggled to remain consistent with it, largely because starting any project or business takes a lot of time, and often things move rather slowly. Even after all the effort I've put in so far, it's still really small and doesn't bring in enough money to fully support me yet. But there is one unique aspect to a business or project that is my own. I am fully in control of my own success. Gonna turn your attention back to the video for a second. Here, I cut down some thin strips for the legs and am laminating them together. Because this cedar is a softwood, I was worried about warping and strength over time, especially since these are going to be outside. Much like a plywood, laminating these thin strips together should make the legs more stable and strong. Additionally, it also gave me a pretty cool looking design feature that I think made the base look more elegant and unique. I like it at least, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. I also used my tapering jig to cut off what will be the inner facing part of the leg. This angle is very subtle, but it adds a lot of character. And one more thing, I cut a 5-degree bevel on the top and bottom of the legs so that they wouldn't stand straight up and down. This also widens the area over which the legs touch the ground and will make it more stable. Okay, so back to story time. I was discussing being in control of my own success. I currently work in a full-time job in IT, and as I've spent more and more time in corporate America, I've felt less and less in control of my future. The job's not that bad. I get to work from home and it pays the bills, but work is work, so it should come as no surprise that my job isn't terribly exciting. But what has really turned me off to it all has been how stuck I feel in the position. And before you say, okay, so find another job, let's talk about that. Around 2 years into my career, I decided it was time to really step it up and find a way to advance, so I studied probably harder than I have for anything to get my Security Plus certification, with the goal of breaking into cybersecurity. This is a base requirement for many cybersecurity roles, so I thought it would really set me up for success, but when I finally was able to put it on my resume, I was met with the same results as when I was applying to similar roles without the certification. This did, however, lead to a promotion at my current job, and the job I'm still working at today, from Tier 1 to Tier 3 support. That was pretty cool, but much like receiving my bachelor's degree, it grew to feel quite anticlimactic. I had worked really hard for this certification to work in cybersecurity and with modern technologies. But as I learned more about my new role, I began to realize how little it was going to overlap with the positions and skill set I was wanting to gain experience in. Because of this, I started an online cybersecurity program at Western Governors University, WGU, and got a bunch more certifications over the next 9 months or so. But still, I was getting no responses on job applications. It felt like all my work was for nothing and that I wasn't likely to get anywhere anytime soon. Getting kind of bored with the program I was in, it was around this time, in spring of 2023, I got an idea that started me on the journey I'm on now. At this point in time, I was living out in Utah in a townhome I had purchased with my girlfriend. Her office had a guest queen bed in it that took up a lot of space, and I wanted to make the square footage more accessible to her. I looked into Murphy beds, all of which were at least $1,000, and got the idea to just make one myself. I had always been somewhat handy, and now that we had a home that was ours to do with as we wanted, I liked the idea of investing in some tools so that making projects like this in the future was feasible and, in the long run, more cost-effective. I found a Murphy bed hardware kit from Create-A-Bed, and we visited the local Harbor Freight to get the basics for this and future projects. This included a cheap table saw, circular saw, a sander, and a few other things. Very quickly, I grew to absolutely love making things, to the point where I really wanted to start a woodworking business. It wasn't too long after that I dropped out of my cybersecurity program and started making picture frames to sell on Etsy. But just as quickly, I realized how expensive tools, jigs, and lumber can be when I visited my local rockler as a customer. I remember just how broke I felt looking at what they sell there and realizing I was going to need to find a way to make building out a shop much cheaper. Now, if you've watched any of my previous videos, you know I wound up getting a job at this rockler, which granted me a 40% discount on a whole lot of that store, including lumber, proprietary offerings, and a lot of other essentials. I was also able to get a 25% discount on Festool, but I was still too broke to make much use of this discount because 25% off an $1,000 tool is still $750. Anyways, this was a great start and also a great learning experience for someone who's new to woodworking. Everyone who worked at the store had some level of passion for this craft and were more than happy to share tips and tricks for projects I was working on. This, paired with plenty of YouTube University, got me to a pretty solid point in my skill set and definitely set me up for success much faster than if I was doing everything on my own. Funny enough though, in January of 2024, a recruiter reached out to me about a part-time contract cybersecurity position in the Salt Lake City area. I had kind of given up on the idea of following that path at this point, but when the interview went well and they gave me an offer, the additional income was too tempting to pass up. So I quit my job at Rockler and started working in cybersecurity for the first time. I went in with a really excited outlook, but it wasn't long before I realized it wasn't for me. As it turns out, a large part of the cybersecurity industry is regulative, meaning the work involved combing through documents and policies, calling vendors to get the latest security patches, etc. Not that I was expecting it to be like Mr. Robot, but the whole reason I've ever taken an interest in IT and cybersecurity is for the technical aspect. In this role, as a contractor, the customer wasn't even giving us basic network access to scan for devices. It just became really monotonous within a very short time frame and led me back to wanting to focus on my own thing, DeAngelis Woodcraft. I still had my full-time IT job, which could pay the bills, but now I wanted to start thinking about how I could get my woodworking to make a bit more money. This was around April of 2024, and you'll notice that later that month I posted my first YouTube video. And with that, you're just about all caught up to where the channel started and what's going on in my life right now. But before I go into that, I want to make a point about everything I've just said. This may have all seemed like a bit of rambling, but I actually wanted to share this experience to elaborate on the idea of being in control of my own success and hopefully give some hope to those that can relate in their own lives. Let me start by saying this: there is no way around hard work. If you want to succeed, you need to be prepared to do the things you really don't want to. For me, editing videos is one of my least favorite tasks, but over the last year, I've committed myself to doing it. This is because I know a YouTube channel with quality content has the potential to make my woodworking more successful. It's marketing that people choose to watch, as opposed to advertising I have to pay for. And it gives potential customers a chance to better understand who I am and the quality I put into my work. Unlike my past efforts to make music or advance up the corporate ladder, I can honestly say I've never shown such commitment to consistency as I have in woodworking. What started as a passion project and a love for making things has, over a fairly short amount of time, graduated into something I want to do for a living. And I'm very ready for the work that comes with that. Really hope I didn't come off too much like a motivational Chad there, but I do hope you can take something away from that. Anyways, let's focus back on the video here so I can walk you through what I'm doing. I'm using some epoxy with black pigment to seal up the end grain on the legs of this table. The pigment is not necessary, but I think it looks better. Again, these will be outside so they could use the extra care. This whole finishing process is a technique I picked up from Wood Whisperer. I'll link his video on exterior finishes in the description, but I used the CPES/Epiphanes marine varnish method. That CPES stands for Clear Penetrating Epoxy Sealer, and this served the function of soaking into this soft cedar and hardening it up, as well as, of course, sealing the wood. I also want to make a quick note: you should wait until after you've applied the penetrating epoxy to fill in the feet with that black epoxy. I had done this before and wound up with some of that black pigment leaking further up into the end grain, where you could see some of it on the show faces of the legs. It wasn't super noticeable, but just something to keep an eye out for. Alright, video's wrapping up, so let me fill you in on what's been going on in my life just recently. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm going through some significant life changes. The reason for these changes being, I was engaged, and now I'm not. It was all rather unexpected and has made life feel a little uncertain lately, but having projects to make and videos to produce has kept me level-headed. Funny enough, these side tables were actually a Christmas gift from my ex-fiance's parents. Don't judge me, they had already gotten me gifts and I had told them I'd make these for them before we broke up. That's all I'm going to say on the matter, because that's really getting into my personal life, but I wanted to share it because it affects DeAngelis Woodcraft. On my own, I cannot afford to live in the house we purchased together, so unfortunately, I'm having to say goodbye to my current shop. I'm gonna be moving in with my sister and her husband in Toledo, Ohio for a bit while I figure out the next phase of this journey. Thankfully, they have a garage that they don't use, so the next shop is already lined up, and I've got a lot of stuff planned to make my new accommodations work so I can continue posting content and making things. Honestly, with everything going on, this was one of the things keeping me up at night the most. I was really worried how I was going to continue my woodworking journey, but having a plan has been very comforting. Not to mention, throughout these uneasy times, I've been reminded that I truly have a great support network. My family and friends have been amazing, and I just want to take a moment to thank them for all they've done to be there for me. I really am a lucky guy, and this experience has reminded me of that. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you liked it, please consider subscribing for future content.